All right, today, as we wrap up this little journey, I want to do a quick overview of the 12-step program. You know, I keep mentioning I'm 12-step friendly and da-da-da-da-da. And it's kind of fun where when I talk about it, especially if I'm speaking at like a hypnosis or the few times I spoke, even at psych conferences, it seems like, people either understand and like the 12-step program, even the coaches in that, and then there are people that hate it, but it's not hate, it's ignorance. There's no other word for it, contempt, because I ask them what's their experience with it. It's a cult, right? Or whatever. And I go, well, maybe it is, but do you condemn, if Michelle goes to mass every day, do you like, oh, that's terrible, cut that shit out, right? It's like, it's just, whenever I'm teaching, especially among hypnotists and NLPers, I'll say, methinks thou dost protest too much. But that's, it's like, but let me give you an overview of why I like it. Well, first of all, why I like it. If you go back and you think about when I talked about levels, about how you go from level to abstinent to experiment to social drinking, maybe abuse, and then you get into dependence, right? If you hit these bottom two, you need extra help. A lot of people just maybe, every once in a while, coach, hypnotist, somebody get a call, I need help with my drinking. And you really start talking to them. From my viewpoint, it's like, you just drink a little too much. It's not like you've gotten a DUI. It's not like you're in all this trouble. God love them. They're the type of people that would get lost in a 12-step program, right? Because, and I'll explain why. But it's kind of like, in that, when I was talking about the levels, or that one I talked about how, addiction, a lot of people think is a disease of connection and maybe based in trauma, right? And you can't connect with other people. And they talk about the rat study, me and my happy rat study, right? But if you have a drinking problem and your cage, if your rat cage is pretty good, if your family is really sane, not all are, but they don't have a lot of substance abuse in it, and people are that, and your work's okay, and people are sane. Well, those people, once they get off of the, once they go, if they went through a treatment, let's say they go through detox and treatment, or go to 12-step for a while, they don't, it's not that they have to go forever, right? They have friends that don't drink. They have family that supports them. But what if, more like my story, alcoholism runs rampant in the family? I only hung around people that drank too much. My life revolved around it, right? So then if you're gonna, this is what I always ask hypnotists or coaches, okay, even if you can do some hypno magic, whatever, and pull you from, you lose the desire to drink, what cage are you going in? Like they talked about the guys that got addicted to heroin in Vietnam that came back, and technically they should be like going through all these withdrawals and fighting it. The ones that went back, they got back with their girlfriend, and they went back to a good job, like this was in the 70s, right? So they went back and they settled down. And they didn't go through withdrawals. They didn't fight it forever. I always think of the movie, if you're old enough to remember, Animal House, right? Where all these guys are drunk and they're getting all this trouble. But everybody skips the ending where most of those guys, including the crazy John Belushi character, it says, became the conservative senator from the state of Alabama. What did he do? Well, he got out of college, he got married, got a life, and I'm not making, it's not political, it's just like he went back. I mean, the frat boy that, as opposed to the guy that at 38, he's still the frat boy. I always think of Vince Vaughn movies and that, where it's like, what's cool and funny at 22 is sad in your 30s, horrible in your 40s, right? And so a lot of this is, so for someone like that, like myself, AA is a community. We talk a lot about community. We're social creatures. We need a community. We need people that, we can relate to. And so AA becomes that community. And I hate to use this term because I think it's overused, a safe space. you know. I remember when I first went to my very first AA meeting, what got me sitting there were, you know, grown men, I'll be older than me. I was in my early 20s, early 20s. And there's these grown men, most of them grizzled World War II vet kind of guys, and they're talking about feelings and emotion and screwing up their lives. You don't hear most of the population talk about that, right? And so it's like, well, and they were basically saying how I thought, you know, that, you know, drinking was the answer. It wasn't the problem until eventually drinking became the problem. It wasn't the answer. So anyway, a quick overview of the 12-step program, right? And this should help you make sense of it, right? And diction, my coffee. AA, the way I understand it, when I read some of the old stuff and that, is AA was meant to be a bridge back to normal living. It was not necessarily intended to be a lifestyle, right? Even though it ended up that way, people go to meetings for decades. I still go, you know, but other people don't. But the steps themselves, which have been duplicated in a lot of therapy, right? In fact, it fits perfectly this cognitive behavioral therapy model, right? Right? Or reality therapy, right? It's like you see a lot of therapists use the format, right? Because it's a structure, right? And it's, you know, you guys watch a lot of videos or gone through a lot of trainings. There's a lot of therapy and coaches, even if they're teaching, they have no like protocol, no methodology. It's almost like, well, I remember when I first took NLP, you'll just know what to do next. What if you don't? You know, it's like, okay. But anyway, so the 12-step program, it was meant to be a bridge back to normal living, right? So here's my model, right? If it was a bridge back to normal drinking or normal living, you know, steps 1, 2, and 3 are the on-ramp, right? They're getting you ready, right? And if you understand the 12 steps, and somewhere I'll post them again, or even just Google 12 steps of AA, and then NA just changed alcohol to drugs, and OA did it to food. I mean, gamblers, same thing. You know, the first 3 steps are prep. Some people call them surrender steps, right? Right. First step is maybe we are powerless over alcohol, our lives have become unmanageable, right? And then people want to argue, I'm not powerless. You know, just had this cool conversation with someone like that in rehab, and I'm like, I looked at your file, so to speak. This is your 4th rehab this year. I would say you don't have any power over this shit once you get started, right? And again, when you hear that step and people argue with it, it said we admitted. It doesn't say you are powerless, you were powerless. And part of that is once you put alcohol in the system, it changes your brain chemistry. And if you have that genetic click, you're off to the races. You know, other people may be able to put it down. I can't, right? So it's admitting that you're powerless over it. And I like to also think, as some coaches would say, you can't fix a problem you're not willing to have. And if you could control your drinking, your drugging, your gambling, you would have done it. Your best thinking got you wherever you're at. Right? And I'm like, oh, okay. So there's that. So, and it, you know, so the first step, maybe we're powerless over alcohol, lives become unmanageable. Second step, came to believe, again, past tense, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves, doesn't get religious, could restore us to sanity. With sanity being, you know, people go, I'm not crazy. Well, if you've gotten 3 DUIs, that would be an insane behavior. If I know I get popped again, I'm never gonna drive again. Right? That if you go and you drink again and drive, then that's nuts. Right? That's insane. So, you know, first you admit you have a problem, you can't change it. Right? And the third step is you made a decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand it, right? And it could be any kind of spiritual thing, because spirituality seems to help the prefrontal cortex come back online. That's why some of the most spiritual people throughout history, I mean, you go back to the Roman emperors that Marcus Aurelius and that, some of their thoughts, you know, it's fascinating, right? So, you know, that you made a decision to turn your will and your life over. And again, this has to do with, well, what you're doing is not working. You're going to need to make some changes, and you can't do it yourself because you're powerless over it, and you need outside help. So those are the on-ramps, right? And then actually, the cool part of the 12-step program is step 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. These are the action steps. This, you know, this crosses the river of addiction, right? Crosses the river of addiction, right? Because these are the steps that act, these are thinking steps, right? You actually do something, right? With the 3rd step being a pillar, and then the 10th step, by the way. But anyway, so you've gotten ready, now you do it. What's the 4th step in the 12-step program? Brilliant. If you're going to do therapy, it says made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Right? Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. How many people do that? Again, you look at, let's say, drinking. What is drinking? If you start with that, what does drinking cost you? You know, relationships, self-respect, self-esteem, money. If you've gotten a DUI, you know, I heard a friend of mine that was in recovery, who was a lawyer, said, well, you know, you ever notice they really crack down on DUIs when you've got no fault divorces and people could get divorced for $99, because divorce back in the 60s and 70s was a gold mine for lawyers. And then when that kind of went away, well, we need something else. DUI kind of stepped in, right? Don't want to go in front of a judge for driving or while intoxicated or impaired, right? It's just the way it is, right? So you take, and it's about, you know, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, right? And again, it's on paper. It's not people go, I'll think about it. No, we all know when you write it down, it looks different, right? And AA has an NA, all the A's of those programs, as you look at the people, places, and things you have resentments against. And what's my responsibility in that? You know? And that there's a lot of power to that, right? Because if you're in the addiction world, you may be drinking at it. You know, I'm mad at this organization because they didn't promote me, right? Guy was mad at his boss because didn't promote him, right? Well, if you look at like, what was my part in it? Well, I miss a lot of work and I make a lot of mistakes, right? Mainly because you're hungover half the time at work or whatever it happens to be. So the 4th step, made a searching, fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to ourselves, to God, to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs, right? What's the nature of your wrongs, right? And people get confused with that step because, you know, addiction by itself usually makes you lie, cheat, steal, hurt people, right? So, you know, if you really work in this field, you'll see people come in, well, I didn't hurt anybody with my drinking but myself. How old were you when you started? Teenager. Do you think your parents worried about you where you were? Right? When you're in the military, do you think as you get older, you realize it, that your sergeants and the commanders, they actually worried about you, right? Especially if you're married, does your spouse. So people go, I only hurt myself because I always put food on the table or all that, right? If you were that, but it's like, and when people do that, in the 4 steps, you've written down the times you lied, cheated, stole this. But when you do this 5th step and you admit it to another person, you know, whether it's your AA sponsor, a priest, I used to always tell people, go find a priest, whether you're Catholic or not, make an appointment, they'll see you. And, you know, if there's one thing about that world, a priest or a rabbi, you know, it's probably happened to them, even an imam. They're the one group that even a subpoena can't get them to open their mouth, right? A therapist, if you're trained in that, you know it. It's like, well, you know, there's limits to confidentiality, right? But so anyway, so you admit it, and it's not, you don't have to tell every time you lied, every time you cheated or stole or hurt someone. It's the nature of it, right? It's the nature of it, right? So, and sharing it with another person, it relieves the burden of self, you know, so you're not carrying. So you know, admitted to God, yourself, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, came to believe that our humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And I always get these two confused. The other is character defects, right? One is remove your character defects. The other is your shortcomings. The way I understand it, that makes sense in my head, is one is acts of, help me overcome the acts of commission, like drinking, lying, cheating, stealing, and acts of commission, holding things back, not being honest with myself and other people, not doing what I know I need to do. So those are the steps, right? And then you get to step 8, which is you made a list of all people you'd harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. To me, it's one of the most brilliant parts of this. It's like, okay, yeah, I hurt my mom, I hurt everybody, whatever it is, right? And became willing. Doesn't mean you do it, right? It just means you have, because if you did the 4th step, you already have it written out. You know who you hurt, things you did, stuff like that, right? So now you have the list. And then the 9th step is made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure you or others. This is the magic step, right? It's like, okay, I did all this bad shit and I want to make amends. Well, I can pay back bills. I can, you know, quit cheating at work. I could do that kind of stuff. But you know, I don't think I have to tell my ex-best friend, oh, by the way, I cheated with your wife. Your wife cheated with me. I want to get that off my chest. Let me make amends for doing that. Yeah, he's still married to her, doesn't know what, you know, you don't have the right. That one you may just have to, I don't know. I mean, depends on your therapist or the person walking you through it. Some amends, you know, you have to be, look at, does this help other people, right? And even if you go to people and say, Michelle, I'm really sorry. I was an asshole. I did this and that. Okay, fine. When you go to do it, by the way, half the time you find out other people don't remember half the shit that you're like feeling bad over. All right. And then most, they didn't say do, they go, well, you know, I'm glad you're doing better. Good for you. Doesn't mean they're going to become friends or anything like that, right? But they always tell people, if you make an amends, the person you're making the amends to does not have to accept it. Okay? A friend of mine went to one of his reunions, high school reunion, 20 or 25 years. And he'd been sober almost a decade. So he sobered up, you know, late, probably around 30, 28, 30. And so, you know, I went back to the reunion and there's a few people there. He went up and said, you know, I'm really sorry I did this. I'm really sorry. And again, he said same thing. Half the people didn't remember. Like, what? We were all crazy, you know. I don't remember the fight after the homecoming game and that, you know, it's like, didn't affect them. This person was carrying it. So I went through that. But then there was a lady there and he saw her and he walked up to her after, you know, things were going. And he said, you know, I really need to apologize to you. I was an asshole, kind of an asshole. You know, I hurt your feelings. I screwed you over, you know, emotionally, you know, toyed with you, all that stuff. So, you know, it's kind of an asshole and I apologize. And he goes, she looked me dead in the eye and goes, no, you're still a fucking asshole. You'll always be an asshole. To me, you're a worthless piece of shit. Don't talk to me. Yeah. She didn't have to accept it. You don't know what. Obviously, he impacted her, you know, and he goes, I didn't think that one was that bad. You know, I did a lot worse, right? And so you have to be willing to make amends, right? And then you have to make, unless it will hurt them or others, right? And that story doesn't go on. I've heard other stories that people forgive, move on, some of them are heartbreaking. A lady that, her amends was to her kids and her ex-husband who divorced, took the kids, left. And after she had some sober time, several years, she reached out to them. And all of the kids, I don't remember how many it was. And the husband said, I'm really glad you're doing great. Don't contact us again. Right? It's like, and then you might hear later on, well, maybe later on they get some closure, maybe not, but it cleans, as they say in this program, it cleans your side of the street. So steps 1, 2, and 3 are prep steps. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 actually ask you to do things. Step 10 is an action step which says continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admit it. So it means like, okay, if you've taken the garbage out, you don't let the garbage build back up. So you continue to take that inventory, and when you're wrong, promptly admit it. And a lot of people say, like, at the end of the day, a lot of people do that anyway. What went good today? What went bad today? How could I be better? I remember, I got to tell my story. I remember me and a guy were having coffee. He was in recovery. We're talking about something and about anger and overreacting and hurting people's feelings. And we're all spiritual, we're getting into it. Then my phone rings, right? And my car was in the shop, right? And I answer the phone, and this guy starts telling me all this work my car needed, right? Which is going to be quite expensive. And it wasn't going to be covered under warranty because I did something to my car, right? Now, okay, now I have a situation. So my response was questioning the man's heritage, parentage, and everything else. Went batshit crazy. I went nuclear, check the records. I've never had that car work. Yeah, I was bad. And I slammed the phone down. And I looked up, my friend's sitting there. His name was John. I look at him, I go, I guess I'm going to have to call that guy back. And, and so I waited a few minutes, called him back, and I actually did what it said, made direct amends, continue to take personal inventory, went wrong, promptly admitted it. I could have waited, called him up and said, dude, I overreacted. He goes, well, we'll work it out when you get here. Right. So I went in, it was fine. And I said, I'm still sorry about the way I reacted. Maybe not what I said, but some of the stuff, how I said it. And all he did, Bruce will appreciate this. All he said is, dude, this is Florida. You should see some of the way that older clientele treat people, And I'm like, oh, okay. But still, I was wrong. Right. So you continue to take, that keeps it from building up. Step 11 and 12 kind of wrap it up and put you back on the online. Step 11 is sought through prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God as you understand him, praying only for knowledge of his will and the power to carry it out. Right? So it's like, whether that's your a God outside yourself, whether it's your own internal feeling, whatever it is, but you meditate, you pray, you try to improve that contact and live a better life. And then step 12 is the carry it on step. And the brilliant statement at the beginning is, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, some people, they think they should get the burning bush before they go and do the work. And some people have. The guy that started AA, that's what happened to him. He had a moment of enlightenment. He saw a light and all this, blah, 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 right? But most people, the other guy that co-founded AA, didn't work like that for him. He felt better after he did all these steps, right? Because you've taken responsibility, you looked at the nature of your wrongs, you tried to change it, you cleaned up your past, you continue to do that, you pray and you meditate, and eventually you think different, right? So having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, continue to practice the steps and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And share that, take this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. and to practice these principles in all our affairs, right? And it doesn't say you become a, Jehovah Witness going door to door or any of that. I don't care. You're not doing that, right? What you're doing is, if someone has a drinking problem, you just tell them your story. You say, this is what worked for me, right? And to live all these principles, right? Because again, you could have a spiritual awakening and still be a complete dick, as people say, And in the 12-step world, what I like, they say, always remember, you may be the only example of AA someone ever sees. Like that guy was screaming out on the phone, if something came up and you go, well, that's AA, I don't want anything to do with it, right? So, it's about living a better life. So anyway, that is, and then you just carry the message, right? And so, and then all of this, people who do this create a community, right? That's the other part, like I say, people that don't understand it. And again, I guess I could wrap it up with, I've seen people, there's several types of people that drink or drug too much. One, let's use drinking, is, like I said, they come from pretty sane family. They have a good life. They just drink too much, right? Well, once if they went through this and they got there, they may be able to go back. Unless you get people that they go to meetings for a couple of years and then they kind of drift away. Doesn't mean they went back to drinking. Just means, well, their life changed. They're living a normal life. But then you have certain people the ones that AA seem to attract more, and people that stay in it forever. Like most of my friends in my little core group down here, they were bar drinkers. They started drinking early. Their families were nuts. They were in bad, from a couple guys were construction workers, which could be a pretty heavy drinking crowd. As he said, after he sobered up, he had to change construction crews. One guy was a prison guard, right? And rough job, highly stressful, and everybody drank afterwards, right? The list goes on, but if you're a bar drinker, you didn't have any good page to go back to, you get into AA and you see other people going through it, you create new friendships, you do things together. This group, this last year, we went to, I don't know, I have to ask my wife, 5 or 6 football games, local high school football games, right? We weren't worried about drinking. It's like, it was just, we're all football fans. So we go to the local high school, right? And just was a great time. We've gone to Bucks games, that group I don't join, but they go fishing together. God knows, they play a lot of golf. They're like, we got to get you on the golf course. I said, I will stab myself in the eye first, right? Currently, I may change. I don't know, right? But we do things together, right? Go out for dinners every once in a while. Sometimes after a meeting, we'll go to coffee, we'll hang around, we get there early. It's a community, it's friendship. And again, if a person, their whole life revolved around drinking, going to the bars, doing this kind of stuff, now you can, let's say you do some hypno magic, NLP magic, they don't have a desire to drink. What do they do after work? Where do they get that community and friendship, right? What are they going to do? Just go home and constantly, binge watch Netflix or something, right? And the AA and NA are the two best places where people that didn't know how learn how to have fun sober, right? And whether it's whatever it happens to be, right? So that's kind of just an overview of the 12-step program, right? It's kind of interesting when you think about it, and it's just misunderstood, but especially these action steps, they're kind of therapeutic in nature. And it helps people remove the things that their guilt would get so bad, they might end up going back to the bad behavior, lying, cheating, stealing, hurting other people, right? That's assuming you're not a sociopath or a narcissist, but, cool. All right. Hope that made sense to everybody. So again, this kind of wraps it up. I don't know what I'm doing next with the addiction world, but it's been fun. If you have any questions, just reach out.